take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thank you for showing up. There's this kind of thing that it comes up recently. Often there's kind of like themes with all this stuff that tend to, I don't know, somehow settle into what a lot of people are dealing with. And what I'm getting at is there's this idea that's come up the last few weeks in kind of various groups or classes that like if you're into Buddhism or you do this Buddhist thing that like you're not going to suffer anymore. Stop. Just like if you're who's here for the first time, like brand new Buddhism 101, right? So you're going to open up any Buddhist book, any Buddhist Google search, the first couple pages, every Dalai Lama, Pema Chodron, Thich Nhat Hanh book, and you're going to see life is suffering in like day one. And then you're like, okay, well, that's good. There's a path out. And then the idea is that your whole time you're attached to like getting out of suffering. And yes, that is the practice. To figure out how to remove suffering from your lives and ultimately free yourself from suffering. Just to put it into context, do you have any idea how many thousands of lifetimes the Buddha lived prior to actually figuring out how to do this? A lot. A very long time. It took him, and if you're not into past lives and the time of the Buddha, they all believed in rebirth and things like that, it doesn't matter. Just remember that it took him a very long time to figure out how to free himself from suffering. So what does that tell us? We're going to what? Suffer. Are you okay with that? That's really what, for me as a practitioner, what this practice is about. Are you okay with the fact that you're going to suffer? Because if you're not, then not only do you have suffering, you also have your resistance to suffering. And that just makes the suffering worse. When we resist and suppress and push away emotions that we're experiencing, and we just try to bury them and ignore them, and they call this spiritual bypassing. I don't know if any of you read Chögyam Trungpa as a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, but this idea of thinking that you're just going to like move past it all. So you're going to suffer. It's the first thing the Buddha said. But the question is, can you understand the cause of this suffering? There are chairs, you don't have to go straight to the back, then I have to yell even louder, and then I suffer, so just come and grab a seat. Right? I'm talking about avoiding suffering, not causing suffering. Look at that. So brave. Thanks. Look at that. That's actually very impressive. Most people would not do that. Yeah. Should I embarrass you even more? There we are. Yeah. But this idea of thinking that the suffering is just going to somehow go away because you get into this Buddhist thing and do some meditation practice, you're fooling yourself. You are going to suffer the rest of your life. Are you okay with that? That's really, I think, where this practice has been incredibly beneficial, is embracing the fact that suffering will exist every day of my life. Then the question is, why is it there? And how can I reduce it? How can I manage it? How can I be real with the cause of it, which is the second noble truth? What is the cause of our suffering? And then the beauty of this practice for me has always been to recognize there is suffering every day, understanding the cause of it, according to Buddhist teachings, very basic: greed, anger, ignorance, really simple. Gave us 3 things to focus on as to why we suffer. And then immediately apply, before you even get to the third and fourth noble truth, immediately apply, for me as a practitioner, impermanence. One of the fundamental core Buddhist teachings is the law of impermanence, which tells us that everything is subject to change. All conditioned phenomena come together for a period of time and then cease to exist, which also means our what? Emotions, our experiences, our thoughts, our sadness, our anger, our depression, our anxiety, everything that you are experiencing that is your suffering will go away. But what does that also mean? It will what? You're in the front row. You should know this by now, right? You heard it quicker, right? It comes back. But it comes back in a different form, in a different way, in a different experience, in something else, in someone else, in somewhere else. But our entire life is just a constant flow of the suffering that we experience, which changes. We understand the cause of it. We try to reduce it. We apply impermanence to it. And then we can get through each day without being crushed. And for many people, that's a strong upgrade from where we're at most of our lives. Right? Especially for people who end up here on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, you know? And I being, the first example of that. Right? I don't sit here every night on a Tuesday for the last 15 years because I'm here to help all of you, you know? Do you know who this practice helps the most? Me. I'm really just selfish in doing this for me. Thank you for being here, otherwise I'd just be talking to myself. So I appreciate you humoring me as we work through this thing called Buddhism and meditation. But really learn to embrace the suffering. Experience it, embrace it, become friends with it. I'm not saying you need to enjoy it, but try not to resist it and know that it's really okay. It's okay to suffer. It is okay to feel sad. It is okay to feel anxious and depressed and miserable. That's okay. Don't think that Buddhism and meditation is all of a sudden just going to magically take that away. Because if you do, you're going to end up giving up on this practice pretty quickly. You know? So learn to be okay with it. You'll get through it. You got through every other past moment of misery in your life. Somehow. Otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here right now. So, all right, so with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you for showing up. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet, just still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable if you're on a cushion. Often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. If you're sitting there like with your arms and legs crossed, you might want to change your posture. It helps mentally and emotionally as well. Just trying to sit up straight comfortably. If you need to move, simply move. If movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means you need to move. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important with this practice is do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. Starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting. breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. Nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata. Awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour. Most of you won't even make it out of this building before you're disturbed by something. Right? Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do. And that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us. And we work on changing our mind and our reaction to life around us, life gets simpler. But it's a practice. It requires setting down all of the efforts to control everything around you. That's why this practice is so simple. You just have to stop trying to control things. You can do that, right? That's it. Stop trying to control everything. Experience life as it arises. Become aware of every thought, every word, and every action, and explore the intention behind it. And live life. That's all. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I'd rather open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. To those who are joining virtually, welcome again. Feel free to say hello as you are. There's a chat box on your screen. If you have any questions, you can put them there. I'll do my best to respond. And as I mentioned, Saturday, the last couple of weeks, for those virtually or always here, maybe joining for the first time, last couple of weeks, we've had a really just kind of inconsistent connection with the streaming. So we've actually had one person out here today, so we're exploring upgraded options for streaming because our millions of followers, we don't want to disappoint you. So appreciate the patience if you've been dropped off at any point in time over the last few weeks. So hopefully the next couple of weeks we'll have a better solution, but this one's been pretty good for 5-6 years. So thoughts, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with?
I was doing some Google research and reading about the 3 marks of existence. And I was just having a challenging time understanding the non-self. The definition that they put was no permanent, unchanging self or soul. And then when I looked at reincarnation, it talked about consciousness is reborn into a new form of existence. And I guess I've always kind of thought that soul and consciousness were very similar or symbiotic or almost same. And so I was wondering if you could kind of help me understand the difference between the two.
Yeah. So we'll just start with some light stuff. So to paraphrase your question, for those virtually didn't hear it, you were doing some Google searching, which is great. I always recommend starting there, like true, I'm not even kidding. I was just Google Buddhist stuff and just get lost in there for a while. And so your question is around the 3 marks of existence, also referred to as the 3 Dharma seals, Sila, Samadhi, Prajna, Nirvana, no self and impermanence. Your question specifically is around non-self, that you're having trouble with that. But what's interesting is, so you're totally cool with the idea of nirvana and impermanence then?
I just was wanting to understand a little deeper
What non-self is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to help me understand, how new are you to Buddhist stuff? Like
Very new.
brand new. Okay,
I
cool.
came here 2 weeks ago.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
2 weeks. You don't have this all figured out yet? Come on. Give it at least like 2 months, and you'll be good. So let me kind of back up a little bit, because your question very specifically was about consciousness, your definition, at least what you read, definition of non-self, no permanent soul, no true inherent existence of a self. Your question specifically was around comparing kind of your idea of non-self and soul, right? So to back up to the time of the Buddha for you or anybody else who might be brand new, a couple things to keep in mind, as I referenced at the beginning of tonight. At the time of the Buddha, and you may know this by now, but pretty much everybody at that time, 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ, they all believed in rebirth. They all believed in reincarnation. They all believed in continuation of consciousness, whatever you want to call it. So if you went to a Dharma talk 2,500 years ago, they weren't showing up just to make sure like they were happy when they ordered their food, right? And let me reverse that. How many of you showed up here today because you want to make sure you have a good rebirth? What's your name? Sorry.
Melissa.
Melissa, did you get into Buddhism because you want to make sure you have a good rebirth?
No.
No. Do you know why the Buddha was teaching what he taught?
No.
To free themselves from the cycle of rebirth. Nobody comes into this practice to free themselves from the cycle of rebirth. People come into this practice for a million different reasons. We're not, we're all different. But to some extent, there's something in our lives that we are not so great with. Whether it's anger, stress, anxiety, sadness, depression, feeling sad, loneliness, looking for spirituality, just trying to calm down. Everyone has a different reason. But it's not because you want to make sure you free yourself from the cycle of birth and death. When the Buddha was teaching, that's what he was teaching, was how to free yourself from the cycle of birth and from rebirth. So the question, which is very deep, and I'll touch on that in a minute, but I haven't even gotten to that yet. It's very important to understand that when you look at the teachings of non-self and consciousness and the soul, they all believed that it was going to continue on endlessly until you freed yourself from the cycle of rebirth. Now, another thing to keep in mind is at the time of the Buddha was raised, for the most part, Hindu, Vedic traditions. They all believed at that time that there was a soul that was, when the body died, that the soul would be reborn. So that you, Melissa, right? Is that what you said? Sorry. That, then the idea would be that when Melissa's body dies, Melissa has this soul. And then that soul is going to be reborn, right? When the Buddha taught through basically his journey, he died at 80, he awakened when he was 35 because he understood the cause of our suffering, and he taught that for 45 years and then he died. What he was teaching was that no, there is no permanent soul, meaning that it's called a laya vijnana. And you'll see this with Buddhism and Google searches and books. So many different translations will call them different things, but the technical term is a laya vijnana, storehouse consciousness. And what the Buddha was teaching is that there's this storehouse of consciousness that is a collection of all of your endless karma, all of your actions. Karma is not what you get, karma is what you give. Karma literally means action. It's generated 3 ways: body, speech, mind. I'm jumping around here, but I have to kind of come back to this question. Body, speech, mind is how we generate karma. So karma is what we bring into the world. It's not what we get. It's not what goes around comes around. All your thoughts, all your words, all your actions, that's your karma, and that, you, Melissa, is what you're bringing into the world. That karma that you are accumulating, in essence, through your thoughts and words and actions, has been around for, according to Buddhist teachings, has been around for endless time, right? Not just the time that you've been born in this physical realm, but it's been around for endless time. And when your body dies, that consciousness is going to continue. But that consciousness is not Melissa's. That would be really kind of ignoring the fact that that consciousness has been around forever. So whoever it was before, is it theirs? Right? One of the best examples I saw for this was, I don't know if it was in a movie or a teacher or both, but you take a rag, and let's say you have tea, you have a teacup, and in the cup, obviously it's tea, that's what makes it a teacup. You shatter the cup, and then on the hand is tea, on the leg is tea, on the ground is tea. You take a rag, you wipe it up. The tea has never changed. Make sense? Everything it was on, shattered, changes, all that kind of stuff. The tea is still tea. That's the consciousness. So what the Buddha was saying is that there's no inherent one thing that Melissa can say, this is Melissa. Non-self does not mean you don't exist. It does not mean you're not here. It just means that you exist completely differently from how you perceive yourself to be. If you're into this stuff and you really want to get confused and never learn anything, every Sunday at 1 o'clock, I do the Heart Sutra class. And I'm not a big plugger for stuff, but we've been breaking this down. We're halfway through this short sutra. We've been doing it for over a year. And we go in depth on these things because it really is looking at shattering these constructs and these stories. If 10 people describe Melissa, would they all say the same thing? No. Who's right? Who is Melissa? If you tell me about Melissa today, or you tell me about Melissa 10 years ago, or 10 years from now, is it going to be the same story? No, it completely changes. The entire world is different from how we perceive it to be. But we think it's one thing and that's it, and that's permanent. And the Buddhists say, no, it's forever changing. So the simple answer for the soul piece is the Buddha taught there is no soul. There's just a collection of tea that will continue to change forms or enter into forms for each birth. And that the only way, back to the technical Buddhist teachings, to end suffering, what's the only way we can stop suffering according to Buddhist teachings ultimately? Based on everything I just said.
Stop being born.
Stop being born. Which is ironic because tonight what I talked about was we have already been born. We are here. Which means we are going to suffer. And people are like, no, I don't want to suffer. And the Buddha said, okay, here's the answer. If you don't want to suffer, free yourself from the cycle of rebirth. Because that's the only way you're going to stop suffering. The moment you are born. I mean, how do we come into the world? Screaming. Right? We're not like, yo, I'm here. We're screaming. We come into the world screaming. And then we age.
Most.
Say again?
Most.
Oh, most.
I have 3 children. Most.
Most of them are screaming.
One did not scream.
Okay, well, there you go. Most of us come into the world screaming, yes. And the one that you had that did not scream when they were born, have they ever screamed?
A few times.
Okay, so we have one child.
Yes.
Right. We all suffer at some point in time. And the Buddha said the only way to stop suffering is to stop being yourself, to stop yourself from being reborn. And the only way to stop yourself from being reborn, put this, it's not even like mocking you or making fun of you, put this into Google right now. You have your phone there? Yeah. Put in 12 links
12 links.
of dependent origination. When you, I'm really just confusing you even more, but when you begin to study that, you'll see that once you break anything on that chain, that is the way to free yourself from the cycle of samsara, from rebirth. 12 links of dependent origination.
Nice.
So, my first teacher always said when we ask questions, don't necessarily look for answers, continue to ask more questions. And that's in essence what that will do. That will send you down a rabbit hole forever. But that's the idea, is to keep exploring. Most importantly, let me bring it back to like something that I think is actually practical for us. Our experiences of suffering will change. Anyone in here been angry at something for 30 years? That can change as well, if you allow it to. That is impermanent as anything. You don't have to believe in rebirth to practice Buddhism. It's got nothing to do with it. For me as a practice, I think of every moment as a rebirth. Every day as a rebirth. Anything I was angry about from 30 years ago, I don't need to be angry about it anymore. Because when did it happen? 30 years ago. So why should I continue to ruin my life today from something that happened 30 years ago? Doesn't dismiss it, doesn't mean it was okay, doesn't make it right. But there's no need to torture myself for it. So, yeah, that's the short answer. Great question. I mean, yeah, keep digging. What else? Yeah.
So, for Buddhist instructors and or monks, is there any training or educating in philosophy or psychology to become an instructor or a monk? Or as like a requirement in addition to the formal teachings?
So let me just kind of say back virtually for them to hear it and also just to make sure I understand your question. I think what you're asking me is for Buddhist monks or instructors, as you said, are they required to have some sort of formal psychology training?
Or
philosophy training. That's your question, right?
Correct.
Yeah. That's an impossible question to answer. Because for 2000, even just today, monks and nuns and Tibetan lamas and Zen priests all over the world have endless different types of trainings and rituals and practices that they go through. In addition to that, many of them will have had potentially deep philosophy studies, depending upon how they were raised, in kind of this very worldly manner. But it's not like I can't
It's
even
not a
compare.
requirement.
Well, it's not even necessary. To say it's not a requirement, I wouldn't even say it's accurate necessarily, because in many ways, you can't say anything is a requirement, because that still makes it sound like this is what's required for someone to become a monk or a nun. It's so different in every way. There are probably monastic training, monk and nun trainings out there where they are required to have some background understanding of that. So I can't say it is or it isn't, but it's different everywhere. Tibetan lamas that grow up in the monastery, from childhood, Dalai Lama type people, lamas, things like that, they're taught everything. Years of history and science and math and philosophy, and, they're not just taught Buddhist sutras and chanting and how to bow and ritual. You know what I mean? So, but every tradition is going to be so different. But ultimately, I think of the Buddhist Siddhartha Gautama as just, he was a really smart dude. And he understood the way the brain and the mind worked. Absolutely. Because to me, that's the Buddhist practice is simply a very deep philosophical way to see the world. And in that regard, studying other philosophies might ruin it. It might be better to know nothing about other philosophies, because all of those, just like Buddhism in and of itself, is also a construct. So in that regard, knowing Buddhist philosophy will also not be correct. Shatter all of it. Krishnamurti. Yeah. Great teacher. So, there's a question here. Let me read it for a minute. So the question is, Thich Nhat Hanh spoke about generating joy and happiness during the 8 steps of mindfulness. When does that begin? I'm still waiting. Yeah, Jesse, I can't tell you when that begins. I think that, and Thich Nhat Hanh, obviously, brilliant Zen master, one of the, wisest, most enlightened beings that we will have known ever in our generation, in our times, passed a few years ago. Deer Park Monastery, for those who've been there, and Plum Villages in France, but Thich Nhat Hanh, the just incredible Vietnamese Zen master, monk, poet, activist with Martin Luther King. And he also has very specific ways of teaching Buddhism within the Zen Mahayana tradition. But what I can say is, this idea of when does it begin, you're still waiting. My guess is that if you're studying and putting this practice into your life, my guess is you have more moments of happiness today than maybe you did yesterday, or this week maybe than you did last week. And so I think it's, again, a little bit dangerous, kind of what I talked about tonight, which is why I talked about that, because people read, they Google stuff, and they're like, end suffering. You're like, yeah, well, that sounds great. When am I going to get there? I don't, as a practitioner, think, am I going to end my suffering? Am I going to abide in this endless place of joy and bliss and happiness every moment? I just think, can I suffer less today than I did yesterday? Can I have a little more joy today than I did yesterday? And it's not a race, right? You're just slowly kind of chipping away at your pride and your ego and your anger and all this stuff that we've built up that causes so much of our suffering. The beauty of this, for me, instead of thinking like, I love how you said you're still waiting. The beauty of this is you have ultimate control over that. So the real question is, when does this begin? When does this begin? It begins when you actually practice all of this every moment of your life. So I hate to put it back on you, Jesse, but it will begin when you practice every moment of this, every moment, or every teaching, every moment of your life. That's when it'll begin, really simple. If we remove greed and have nothing but generosity, if we remove anger and have nothing but compassion, and if we remove ignorance and have nothing but wisdom, that's the cause of our suffering, the three poisons, in every moment, then that's when it begins. Sorry, I almost let you off the hook. Another question here. Is it normal for new meditators to feel that they're suffering more once they become aware of how much mental energy is expended with negativity, but before they have a lot of practice with letting it go? Yes. I talk about that a lot, that I think early on, and when I say early on into meditation and Buddhist practice, I mean like the first 5 years. That's to me what I mean by early on. That early on, it will really kind of upend the way you live your life. And it can, the first couple years, especially a year or two, really cause you to potentially suffer more, because many of us have been running from our suffering our whole lives. And, we have addictions, healthy or unhealthy, cravings, healthy or unhealthy, that we turn to escape from our suffering. And we talked about this on Saturday. There are healthy escapes and unhealthy escapes. So this isn't about whether they're healthy or unhealthy, but we constantly are turning to something to take away our pain. And Buddhism is a mirror. And when we sit and we look in the mirror, what do we see? We see our heart. We see our mind. We see the cause of our suffering, which is us. It's not anybody else. And when you take ownership of that, you're like, oh man, this is on me. And that is tough. So when you sit with that, and you see the sadness, and you see the pain, and you see whatever it is, that's part of this process. And that's why I always say it's not fun. What else? Questions? Yeah.
Thanks for doing this, Jeff.
For sure. Thank you.
So my question goes back to talking about all night and behind suffering. So if you're alive, you're basically suffering. Life sucks, but it's also pretty beautiful at the same time.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know beauty without the ugly shit in the world. And according to Buddhist teaching from 500 years ago, to end suffering was to stop the cycle of samsara, right? And no one's able to actually do that. Once they believe that, now it's logical. We can't kill ourselves and end our suffering, and there's going to be reborn and suffer again. Until you're enlightened, I suppose, reach nirvana. But as like this practice is probably a rhetorical question. We're not going to end our suffering, so Buddhist practice, now is more practical. It's just to minimize our suffering in the direct perception in a present moment, which we understand our thoughts, what makes us angry, greedy, or ignorant.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like the crux of,
That's it, man. That's all I've been telling people for the last 18 years. Summed up in one sentence, you're good, yeah. You don't have to come back. now you got to do all that stuff because the reality is you're still suffering. So you're not doing it enough.
But that suffering is never going to stop.
No, that's a cop-out.
Yeah.
That's you saying, well, I'm going to suffer, so I'm just going to continue to treat people like crap. Or I'm going to continue to be angry at people. Or I'm going to continue to hold grudges because I'm just going to suffer anyway. So, no. Forget enlightenment. Forget nirvana. Forget the cycle of rebirth. Think about, can you go through the rest of this evening and in every single one of your thoughts and words and actions be filled with loving kindness and compassion. Be filled with equanimity. Be filled with joy. In every thought, every word, and every action. That is the practice. And the reality is, whether we focus on the cycle of rebirth to get off of it or not, the way to do it is the same. So, to your question, rebirth and freeing ourselves from the cycle is irrelevant because the only way to free ourselves from the cycle, as I mentioned, the 12 links of dependent origination, is all about recognizing our greed and our anger and our ignorance. And I hear you, like, jokingly, which is beautiful and serious, and I hear, like, the jokiness and the seriousness, and yes, we're always going to suffer throughout our life. And yes, there's also a lot of beauty in life. But, can you be nicer to yourself?
Yes.
Yes.
Always.
Always. Can you be nicer to others?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you be more forgiving of yourself?
Yes.
Can you be more forgiving of others?
Absolutely.
Could you be more generous to yourself?
Yes.
Could you be more generous to others?
Yeah.
That is the only thing that matters. Forget everything else. That's why I'm a big fan of like the learning of, the storehouse consciousness and the 3 Dharma seals. Like, we got to start somewhere. That's where we all start, is learning these key basic teachings of Buddhism. But what it all boils down to, kindness towards self and others. That's it. And if we will suffer less. That's the practice. Doesn't change. It's just so hard. Zen Master Dogen, that lived 1200 to 1253, the founder of the Soto Zen school, he would say practice is, and this kind of addresses that question, but he would say practice as if your hair is on fire, right? I don't have to worry about that so much anymore, neither do a few of you in the room, but many of you who have still beautiful hair, if your hair was on fire, you wouldn't just sit there and be like, oh, my hair's on fire, I'm just going to let it burn. No, you'd be rushing pretty quick to put it out. Why? If your hair's on fire, how's it feel?
It hurts.
It hurts.
You suffer.
You suffer. And how do you feel right now? You're hurting and you're suffering. So if we put the same amount of diligence, that's the Bodhisattva here, Samantapadra, that's what he represents. If you put the same amount of effort and the same amount of diligence into putting your hair, getting your hair no longer to be on fire, if you put that into the things I'm talking about, you'll see drastic decrease in the amount of suffering. Not just for you, but in those around you. Imagine all the people that you're holding grudges towards. And all the people that you got angry at today and yesterday and 20 years ago. And all the people you're going to get angry at tomorrow. Just imagine if you sent them endless love, endless compassion, endless forgiveness. And if there's 50 of us in this room, if every one of us who probably is still angry at 5 people in our lives, right? If every one of us just dropped all of that and sent them nothing but love and compassion, that's 250 people that are free from us holding something over them. Wouldn't that be nice? That's why we do this practice. What else? Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm pretty new to the practice. I was raised in a Christian home. And I haven't gone to church in a hot minute. It's probably been a good 30 years. So I'm interested in your perspective on can Buddhism coexist with other religions in an individual
Yeah, definitely. No, good question. I'll just paraphrase for those virtually. So your question is, you were raised, you're new to Buddhism, to this practice. You were raised Christian, hadn't been in a church in a hot minute, which you then said was 30 years. And can Buddhism kind of coexist with Christianity or other religions? So absolutely yes. A couple things. at the time of the Buddha, and he was just, again, for those who might be brand new, you may know this by now, but he wasn't like a god, he wasn't the big belly dude, he was just a person. He was a prince. He left the home when he was 29 years old, left the palace, roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. He sat down under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, India, and at 35 years old said, I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer. And then he figured out the Four Noble Truths. He then taught that for 45 years, and he died at 80. So he was just a person who lived and died. And when they came to him and asked him questions about, at that time, for the most part, they all were Hindu, like I said, so they believed in endless gods and goddesses, right? This is before Christ, so our God and world that we know today didn't exist. And they asked him, should we believe in gods and goddesses? And he said, I'm just a human. If you believe in them, you do. If you don't, you don't. That's up to you. I'm not here to tell you what religious beliefs to have. I'm here to show you a more philosophical, simple way of living your life. So if you fast forward that to today, from what I've learned in my practice, or the way I kind of hear a lot of people present this is, a lot of people ask, is Buddhism a religion or philosophy? I'll start there. And I'll close the night with this thought, because I want to give this a little bit of time and then we'll close. A lot of people ask, is it a religion or philosophy? And a lot of people come into Buddhism because they don't like what? Religion. They're like, I'm not into religion, I'm going to go check out that Buddhist thing, because it's a philosophy and a way of life, and they're really attached to that. If you want to think that, beautiful. Somebody asked the Dalai Lama years ago, like, does this country need more Buddhists? And he said, the world has enough Buddhists, we don't need more, right? We just want people who are peaceful and happy. And so this idea of it being a religion or philosophy, for 2,500 years, it's been a devout religious practice. Right? If you go to Buddhist temples down the street, you will see bowing and chanting and rituals and robes and a lot of stuff that looks like a Christian or Catholic church or Jewish temple I was raised. Right? To them, they practice it religiously from how they were raised in those cultures. Now, ultimately, if you look at definition of religion, it says belief in a higher power. If you look at kind of Webster dictionary. Buddhism is not a belief in a higher power. So by that definition, Buddhism is not a religion. But I always like to point out that it's practiced religiously because, if you go to a Japanese Buddhist temple, Vietnamese Buddhist temple, Taiwanese Buddhist temple, and you're like, yo, this isn't religion, it's kind of like going into the Catholic Church and telling them it's not religion. To them it is. But to the average person, quick show of hands, how many of you in this room are Buddhist? How many hands do you see up? There's a half a hand behind you. Nobody who comes here is Buddhist. They don't come here to become Buddhist, and they're not leaving Buddhist. They're just stressed out, trying to get through their day. Years ago, so for the people who learn Buddhism in a modern Western sense, it's a philosophy and a way of life. Again, Buddhists don't care what you call it. Years ago, a friend of mine, she's Catholic, and she got into Buddhism, and she considered it a software upgrade. Her Catholic faith was important to her. She went to church. I mean, it was really important to her, but she was unhappy. And practicing meditation and looking at the practices, which is really what I broke down, what's called the four Brahma Viharas, right? These are very fundamental teachings of Buddhism that I just break down into simple terms, which translates to loving kindness. I didn't make up these terms, but loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Do those four terms sound religious to you? No. But that is hardcore, fundamental Buddhist teachings, to practice loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. That's just kindness. That, by the way, I'm pretty sure Jesus and every other great religious leader, for the most part, was teaching. So they all were teaching very similar things. So she called it a software upgrade because she said that she was unhappy. Practicing these teachings made her a kinder, gentler, happier person, which actually brought her closer to her religious faith. And I thought that was a beautiful application. So you'll see, like in Judaism, we call them Jubus. I don't know if you've heard that before. But Richard Gere kind of coined the phrase, Dalai Lama's buddy, he called it a Jewish Buddhist, a Jubu. I always reference now Penny Bridges. We do a lot of work with the LGBTQ community and strong representation here, probably 30% of this community, truly. And Penny Bridges, Reverend Penny Bridges at St. Paul's Cathedral, they light up the cathedral every year for Pride. And she said, when we got the award there, she said that there are many Episcopalians that are better Episcopalians because of their time spent at the Dharma Bum Temple. And that's no like, yay, we're cool. That's just pointing out that we're just practicing kindness, and whatever religious beliefs you have, keep them or don't keep them. But they play nice together. from the Buddhist side of things. Now, I'm not saying it's the same from the other side of things. I'll close with this last example. There was a college group here. We get a lot of other religion, universities and colleges and whatnot that come here to explore other religions. And a couple years ago, somebody from a different religion, I won't say which one, but her first question was, can Buddhists love their mothers? Because she was taught in her religious university that Buddhists practice non-attachment, and that means they are detachment, and that means that they can't love their mothers. So I was like, well, now I know why you people think us Buddhists are crazy. And I was able to help her understand that yes, Buddhists can love their mothers. So 3-4 years later, she started coming back and attending classes regularly. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May this merit be transferred to Pam during her time of suffering, and to Mark and his family who suffers at this time, and to Meredith during her time of healing. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. All right, before you all head out, our Dharma Bum host Hazel has a few announcements for us.
Hello. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program meets every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay and close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thank you.